I was managing a high-end restaurant in Lyon, France, known for its delicate traditional cuisine. An American couple was seated, and the husband, after looking at the menu for a few seconds, called me over. "Listen," he said, leaning in conspiratorially. "I see you have all this fancy stuff, but here's the deal. It's our anniversary. Can your chef just make us 2 big old ribeye steaks with loaded baked potatoes? And I mean, loaded bacon bits, sour cream, the works." I tried to explain that we didn't have those ingredients. He looked genuinely confused and replied, "But you're a restaurant, right? Just go get them." "We're paying customers." The entire staff just froze. My cousin is a park ranger in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. He was leading a small group tour when an American woman decked out in brand new gear stopped and pointed at a massive ancient tree. "Excuse me," she asked with total sincerity. "What's the Wi-Fi password for the forest? I'm trying to upload a picture to my Instagram. But I have no signal. Don't you have like a park-wide network for guests?" My cousin just stared at her, then at the toucan sitting on a branch above her and said, "The toucan knows, but he is not telling." I was working the front desk at a hotel in Rome, right near the Vatican. An American family checked in, and the father asked me for directions. I showed him on a map. He studied it for a moment and then asked, "Okay, so what time does this Pope do the thing?" I asked him to clarify. "You know the thing. He insisted where he comes out and blesses all the pizzas. I saw it in a movie once. I want to make sure we get a good spot to catch a blessed pepperoni." I had to inform him that the Pope does not in fact bless pizzas. The disappointment on his family's faces was profound. During a university semester in Dublin, I was in a pub with some classmates. An American student from our program was telling everyone how much he loved Ireland. He then turned to our Irish friend Liam and said, "It's so cool that you guys have kept up the whole leprechaun thing. Is that like a government job? Do you have to go to a special school to learn how to be one? Or is it more of a family business you inherit?" Liam, who was just a regular, slightly short guy with red hair, just slowly put his pint of Guinness down on the table and didn't speak for the rest of the night. I was on a guided tour of the Acropolis in Athens. The guide, a passionate historian, was explaining the intricate history of the Parthenon. An American man interrupted him, holding up his phone. "This is all great," he said, "but my step counter app says we've been walking for an hour. Is there an escalator or a funicular to the top?" It feels like a major OSHA violation to have a stalwart tourist attraction this inaccessible. You guys could get sued for that in the States. The guide looked as though one of the ancient statues had just come to life and slapped him. My friend is a classical musician with the Vienna Philharmonic. After a performance, an American couple came backstage to congratulate a violinist. The woman gushed, "That was just wonderful. Your violin sounds amazing." Then she leaned in and asked, "Is it a real Stradivarius?" The violinist proudly said, "Yes." The woman's husband then chimed in, "Wow. What kind of gas mileage does it get?" There was a long, painful silence as the violinist tried to figure out if he was being insulted or if the man genuinely thought a violin was a type of car. I was working at a cheese shop in a small village in Switzerland. An American tourist came in and asked to sample some Gruyere. I gave him a piece. He chewed it thoughtfully and then said, "It's okay, but it's a little bland. Do you have any of this in the spray can version? It's so much easier for when you're making nachos and the flavor really pops." I just stood there, holding a wheel of cheese that had been aged for 18 months by a family of artisans, and I felt a piece of my soul wither and die. At a beautiful historic onsen, hot spring in rural Japan, the rules about washing thoroughly before entering the communal bath were posted everywhere in multiple languages. An American tourist completely ignored this, walked straight to the serene, steaming pool, and jumped in wearing his board shorts. When the attendant rushed over to politely explain the rules, the American replied, "Relax, man. I took a shower this morning. Besides, a little dirt builds character. Right." The silent collective glare from the elderly Japanese men already in the bath could have boiled water. I was on a train going through the Scottish Highlands. The landscape was breathtakingly beautiful and desolate. An American woman across the aisle was staring out the window with a frown. She flagged down the conductor and said, "Excuse me, I think you've taken a wrong turn. We've been looking at nothing but empty hills for an hour. Where are all the castles and the guys playing bagpipes?" My travel agent promised me the full Braveheart experience. The conductor, a man with a gloriously thick Scottish accent, just sighed and said, "Aye, madame." They take weekends off. While visiting a Buddhist monastery in Thailand, our group was instructed to remain silent and observe the monks during their morning meditation. It was a deeply peaceful and spiritual atmosphere. About 10 minutes in, an American tourist's phone started ringing loudly with a heavy metal ringtone. He answered it and in a booming voice said, "Hey, Dave. No, I can't talk long. I'm in the middle of this, silent yoga thing with these monks. Super boring. Anyway, did the deal close?" The head monk opened one eye and just stared at him. I was bartending in Iceland during the winter. An American came in shivering and ordered a hot chocolate. He then looked at me and asked, "So, when do you guys switch over to summer?" My wife booked this trip, and she thought Iceland meant it. Was, tropical, like next to Hawaii. I had to gently break the news to him that Iceland is in fact icy, and that he was currently as far north as Alaska. He looked at his Parker and said, "Well, that explains a lot." At a museum in Cairo, I saw an American family looking at a stunningly preserved sarcophagus. The mother was reading the placard, which explained it was from the 21st dynasty around 100 BC. Her son, who looked about 16, scoffed and said, "That's so fake. Look at the hieroglyphics. They're just emojis. See, that's a bird. That's a snake. They're just ripping off apple." His father nodded sagely and added, "Good eye, son. Nothing's original anymore." The Egyptian museum curator standing nearby looked like he was going to have an aneurysm. I was working on a vineyard in Bordeaux, France. We were giving a tour to a group explaining the concept of terroir, how the soil, climate, and environment give the wine its unique character. An American in the group raised his hand. "That's a nice story," he said, "but it's not very efficient. Have you guys ever thought about just building a giant climate-controlled biodome over the whole vineyard? You could standardize the product and probably triple your output. It's all about scalability." The vineyard owner, whose family had worked that same land for 300 years, just walked away without a word. In a crowded market in Marrakesh, Morocco, an American tourist was trying to buy a rug. The shopkeeper offered him a price. The American laughed and said, "I'm not paying that. I'll arm wrestle you for it. If I win, I get it for half price. If you win, I'll pay full." It's the American way of negotiating. The shopkeeper, a small elderly man, just stared at the tourist's outstretched arm in utter bewilderment, while the entire market seemed to pause and listen. I was on a flight to Sydney, Australia. The American passenger next to me was very chatty. As we began our descent, he looked out the window and said, "Wow, it looks so normal. I was expecting everything to be upside down. Is that something that only happens on the ground?" I assured him that physics worked the same way in the southern hemisphere. He looked skeptical and replied, "Well, that's a relief. I was worried my drink would fall out of my cup when we landed. A friend of mine is a chef at a restaurant in Lima, Peru, that specializes in ceviche. An American customer ordered their most popular dish, took one bite, and called my friend over to his table. "This is delicious," the man said. "But I have a major health concern. This fish is raw. I could get very sick. Could you please take this back and deep fry it for me? I'd feel much safer." My friend told me he just stood there, unable to form words as he contemplated the culinary sacrilege being requested. I was at a historical reenactment of a Viking battle in Norway. It was a fantastic display of culture and history. During the Q&A session afterward, an American tourist asked one of the reenactors, "Your costumes are great, but the horns on your helmets look a little small. In America, Our Minnesota Vikings football team has much bigger, more impressive horns. Did you guys run out of budget? Or is that just a creative choice? The reenactor had to patiently explain that real Vikings never wore horns on their helmets at all. While visiting the DMZ between North and South Korea, the tension was palpable. Soldiers stood guard, and the history of the conflict was explained in grave tones. It was a very somber experience. An American tourist broke the heavy silence by asking the South Korean soldier guiding the tour, "So, is there a gift shop on the North Korean side? I bet they have some really unique, kitsy communist souvenirs. I'd love to get a t-shirt." The soldier's face remained a perfect, emotionless mask, but his knuckles were white. "I was working at a bookstore in Honor, the famous town of books in Wales." An American couple came in and browsed for a while. The husband brought a beautiful leather-bound copy of Shakespeare's works to the counter. "This is great," he said. "Do you have this in an audiobook version? I love the idea of reading. But I don't really have the time for the actual, reading part." I just pointed him towards the door and told him to try the internet. At a tango club in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The atmosphere was electric. Dancers moved with passion and precision. An American tourist, who had clearly had a few drinks, got up and tried to join in with a woman on the dance floor. He started doing a clumsy version of the Macarena. When his partner looked at him in horror, he shouted over the music, "Come on, lighten up!" All these Latin dances are basically the same, right? The music screeched to a halt. I was on a boat in the Galapagos Islands, watching the incredible wildlife. The naturalist guide was explaining the theory of evolution and Darwin's observations. An American woman on the tour looked very distressed. She finally raised her hand and said, "I'm sorry, but I have to object. My pastor says evolution isn't real. Can you please tell us the version of the story that's in the Bible? I paid a lot for this trip, and I don't want to be fed a bunch of lies." The guide was so stunned he nearly dropped his binoculars in the ocean. My sister was teaching English in a small town in Spain. One of her American colleagues who had been living there for 6 months complained to her constantly. Her biggest issue, "I just don't understand why they have a different word for everything." She said, "It's so confusing. Why don't they just learn the English words? It would make everything so much easier for us. It feels like they're being difficult on purpose." My sister had to explain the concept of a foreign language to a language teacher. I was at a coffee plantation in Colombia learning about the Binto cup process. It was fascinating. At the end of the tour, we had a tasting. An American in the group took a sip of the freshly brewed world-class coffee and made a face. "It's a little bitter," he said. "Do you have any French vanilla or hazelnut syrup I could add? And maybe some whipped cream?" That's how I take my coffee at home. The Colombian farmer who had personally grown the beans looked at him with an expression of pure, unadulterated sorrow. While hiking along the ancient Inca Trail in Peru, a member of our group, an American fitness influencer, kept stopping to take selfies. At one of the most sacred and beautiful viewpoints, he turned to our local Quechua guide and said, "This is a great trail, but the branding is terrible. You should call it Incadreadable Abs or something catchy. You'd get way more engagement online. I can help you workshop some hashtags." The guide whose ancestors built the trail just nodded slowly and kept walking. I was at a pub quiz in a small English village. One of the questions was, "What is the capital of Australia?" The team of American exchange students next to us were stumped. I overheard one of them whisper confidently to the others, "Guys, I think it's a trick question. Australia is all desert and kangaroos. They don't have cities, let alone a capital. Just write down the outback." The silence from their teammates was deafening. An American tourist in a crowded Mumbai train station was getting increasingly agitated. He finally yelled at a railway official, "This is chaos! There's no order, no proper lines. How does anyone get anywhere?" The official calmly replied, "Sir, this is not chaos. This is a complex self-organizing system with 1 billion moving parts." The Americans scoffed. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. In America, we have things called lines. You should try it." I was working at a ski resort in Whistler, Canada, An American from Texas came to the rental shop wanting to try skiing for the first time. I was fitting him for boots when he asked, "So, the chairlifts have heaters and cup holders, right? And how often do they stop for bathroom breaks on the way up the mountain?" I had to explain that a chairlift is essentially just a moving chair on a wire. He looked horrified. At a memorial for the atomic bombing in Hiroshima, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. People were quiet and respectful. I saw an American tourist taking a selfie with a big cheerful thumbs up with the A-bomb dome in the background. He then turned to his friend and said, "This place is epic. The destruction is like movie quality. So cool." Several Japanese visitors who overheard him simply turned and walked away, their faces etched with pain and disbelief. I was on a tour of a medieval dungeon in Edinburgh. The guide was describing the grim conditions and torture devices. An American woman in the group raised her hand and asked, "Did the prisoners have access to a lawyer?" Because under the Sixth Amendment, they're entitled to legal counsel. This all seems highly unconstitutional. The guide just stared at her and said, "Madame, the Sixth Amendment was ratified about 600 years after this dungeon was built. An American was visiting a friend in Helsinki during the summer when the sun barely sets. At around 11 p.m., with the sky still bright, he looked out the window and said, 'Wow, your streetlights are incredibly powerful. They make it look just like daytime. What brand are they? I want to get some for my backyard.' His Finnish friend had to explain that he was looking at the actual sun.